Hey there, fellas. Okay, so exactly 1 year ago, we decided to search for something unusual. Something interesting for us to work on and for you to watch. And we decided why not get a gas turbine engine and fit it to a car. We bought an engine for an Mi-2 helicopter. First drive episode. Shall we? Wait, Vlad! Run! Won't spin? Yeah, it won't spin. What's happening? I can't work it out. Doesn't want to run? It doesn't. Try and keep purging it. Sergey, don't come too close. Something hot flew out of the exhaust at some point. I don't know if it was slag. Maybe that was some kind of dirt flying out. It sat for a number of years, it needs to heat up every time. Could be biting off and spitting out chunks. I doubt it was coming off the blades. But then who even knows, it could be coming from anywhere. At some point the prop shaft was binding. Well, it did start to spin. It seized near the end. Really? It's on fire! You gotta purge it! And after that outing, this is the state the engine is in currently. Terrific stuff. And to figure out what's wrong with it, I suggest we first revisit the very start of this series. Okay, now we need to figure out what we're dealing with. I guess initially we'll be asking questions, because we have no idea what this is and how it's supposed to work. So these engines are claimed to be in working condition. Yeah, well, I sent one engine to Moscow. They bought it for a museum and they should have started it by now. We knew that the engine had been sitting for a while, and sitting outside, without any protection. But this being a reliable aircraft engine, we decided to go check it out, with the thought that if everything is in order, then we might as well buy it. And buy it we did. What the f did you buy? It's got a pipe this big in the back. We brought it back to base and proceeded to inspect it. We looked at it, touched it here, spun it there, downloaded a couple of books. Because without literature, you look at that entire assembly, you're seeing a bunch of tubes, blades. It's all super convoluted. You sort of have an idea of the physics of it all, but as for how it actually works, how it's controlled, how you start the damn thing, none of us had any idea. So we're going to have to connect this shaft to a gearbox. We'll need to situate the gearbox somewhere. Right around here you'll have the differential. And up here is where the helicopter blades are located. So we downloaded that literature, had a look, and realized that we're missing this lovely thing right here. This is what's known as an STG, starter generator, which is what gets the engine to run. It spins it up and then works as a generator. It's pretty clear that the STG was removed at some point, because this was undone at a way later point than the engine itself. So it was definitely tampered with. They sold the starter. This is interesting, looks like this is for tuning. Better be careful with that. Anyway, we ordered one used. And 1 week later it arrived and we had it. The starter is known as an STG. It's a combined starter generator. It produces 24 volts, but it can be switched to 48. It's an incredibly smart device. That's the STG which spins. So we started looking into it, we figured out the fuel system. That was all good and well. But then we worked out that we lack an ignition system. The ignition coil. Our engine did not come with one, but we were able to find one for sale. There were not many of them online. But we contacted the seller, paid for it, it was sent over, and now we had the full set with an almost complete engine assembly. Of course, without the plethora of gauges you'd use to monitor it, but in any case, it was ready to be started. Switch the STG to 48. 48, do it. I already have. Oh, you have? Okay, keep it there. And after we tried starting the thing a couple of times, which we failed to do, this STG of ours, I'll just say it like it is, it failed. This was not a new part, and something inside of it burned up. But we found some folks who were like, bring it over. We have a bit of experience with these. We fixed them before, and they fixed ours, we picked it up, and after that it was working pretty well. However, the most critical and sketchiest issues had yet to rear their ugly heads. One interesting thing about this engine is that you can't start it with no load. It needs to be loaded up in order to prevent a runaway situation, or the engine over-revving, because they are very sensitive to that sort of thing. That was very interesting. And after those trials, for some reason, the ignition coil failed all of a sudden. And we were simply unable to find another one to replace it with. But we figured we could try using one of these instead. That got our hopes up. Here we are thinking we got this down. And from there we proceeded to fit the engine to a car. We installed the engine into our Lexus GS and set up a direct connection from the engine to the rear wheels with no transmission in between. The engine was a very good fit. We got everything connected. We put the car onto a lift, started it. The wheels began to turn, we were all gleeful. However, then we noticed that the engine was binding slightly, and it was making some rather unpleasant noises. We thought that it was because of dirt that was accumulating in there for years, and that eventually it'd find its way out. Something hot flew out of the exhaust at some point. I don't know if it was slag. Maybe that was some kind of dirt flying out. However, the sounds were not constant, and we all thought the problem would go away. And so after that successful start, when we saw the wheels turning and we were all so happy, well, we decided to fit a transmission, because it would have been dumb not to. We are dealing with a car after all, you gotta control that process. And so we fitted a transmission, clutch, pedal, everything you'd need. And riding that wave of enthusiasm, we went out to try and drive the thing. Wait, Vlad! Run! And while we were testing it, well, we came fully prepared. We were in a fantastic mood, the weather was nice, and we were expecting to post a quarter-mile time on that GTD 350 of like 7 seconds or something ridiculous. But no. Once we started it, we ran into some issues. That noise that I mentioned, and the binding issue, which was the most unpleasant thing. When the engine was revving up, you could hear that it's on, it's working. Everything is all good and well. But then the differential starts seizing. And it's happening intermittently. It didn't make any sense. Couldn't rev high enough. I mean, I turned it off. Also, I was opening this thing gently. Didn't open it by any more than 20%. It won't rev any higher than it should anyway. We might have flooded it with how long we were at it. Also, it could be, well, things were going well near the end while the pressure was low. The prop shaft, I mean, the flywheel was already up to a decent speed. And when you tried setting off, it immediately stopped. I didn't even have enough time to try. I went to switch the injector off, and as soon as I did, I hear it go, "Oh, you didn't even try." It seized up. For real? That's a bummer. It overheated. It's getting very warm. Is that why sparks were flying? Of course. You saw it. Sparks were flying like off a welder. And they were huge, too. Like enormous. They hurt. Then the unexpected happened. The thing seized. Well, it was the diff that seized. It was binding while it was cold. But in that instance, when it got hot, the diff seized at a higher rotational speed. It would seem as if the engine immediately overheated. I mean, it got really warm, it caught fire, and it was raining fire from the exhaust. It was not a pleasant experience. During our last test, which was not a success unfortunately, well, it was either a case of something seizing or disintegrating because of the stress. The inner fan blades maybe, because we saw bits of them evacuating. When we came over to investigate, we saw bits that looked like they were ceramic. I think we might be missing the fan blades that are meant to set everything into motion. I can see bits lying right there. I can see broken fan blades. I think if we take the other side apart, we'll see something new there. We need to get to the bottom of this. Here we have the diff. We probably won't be cracking it open. I think you're meant to take it apart by this seam, to split these two halves, and then we'll see what's inside of them. Now we've just separated these two halves, and straight away this is what we see. The thing overheated and disintegrated. I guess we shouldn't beat ourselves up too hard over this, because let's remember for a second where we got this engine from. Okay, so the fan disc, and I'd say this is the number 1 fan disc, yeah. That would be it. It's likely the hottest one. And the reason we saw those epic fire droplets, well, the fan blades overheated and melted. Bits were flying out. Right, let's keep tearing it apart to see what else it has in store for us. As for what sort of initial thoughts we had, well, the first place our minds went to was fuel. But you see, here's the thing. While we were starting the engine up, the fuel system was working fine. At least we thought so. Because, well, the pump was pumping. And the engine responded very well to when we were dialing power in and pulling it out. So, most likely it was working. Another reason could have been lubrication. But the main reason we pulled this engine apart was to see what condition the oiling system was in. And after tearing it down, we checked all of the galleries, the injectors, and there was oil everywhere. That tells us we had lubrication, meaning that the oiling system was probably not the culprit, and that we had to continue our investigation. Another thing that could have happened was we over-revved it. We did try to keep track of the revs, but we didn't have a tach, so we were eyeballing it. But we did our very best not to over-rev it. Though at certain points things were getting scary and we had no idea how fast it was turning. But we all knew that the rev count was very high. In those moments we'd suppress it by means of pulling fuel out to bring the revs down. We obviously didn't want to destroy the engine so quickly, and God forbid someone would have gotten injured. There's a good chance that the engine might have to be removed with this still on the shaft. That's my assumption anyway. Here's the fan disc. So over here you'll see that we had oil burning. This is the oil feed, that's likely the return. Or here it is rather, the feed. Anyway, this had oil in it. And over here we'll see that it was leaking through. Now of course all of this was spinning and turning and getting warm. I can hear crunching, but my guess is that some dust has found its way in. So my assumption, either we had issues with the bearings, or with oiling. We need to figure out why this happened to us. Because when we first started it and saw the sparks flying, we thought that was the dirt that accumulated in there coming out. But turns out it wasn't something left by birds or mice. It looks like this was the issue from the very start. Right, let's keep taking stuff apart and investigating then. See what condition the bearings and bushings are in, and then decide what to do next. Right, let's carry on. So look, we've almost fully taken it apart. And we still haven't quite figured out why the engine failed. This is actually creating even more questions that we don't have answers for. How did this happen? So it would appear as if the engine burned up because it wasn't spinning like it should. But on the other hand, we didn't load it up enough to provide sufficient resistance. When we had that Lada engine, but then we spun that one up manually. We were helping it out. The engine was turning beautifully. I mean, there were slight issues, but we got it to turn. The bearings could have been sticking due to a lack of lubrication, but we actually had lubrication. So why did it seize? This is what was getting snagged. What I see is that those blades were rubbing. This part over here, it was turning in such a way that at some point it got hot and seized. After cracking it open, we worked out why it was raining fire. So look, a few of the shafts actually ceased to continue rotating. The blades melted, and the stream of hot gases was actively launching those hot little bits out, with those burning little pieces falling onto our heads and so on. And as a result, anything that could have melted and caught fire, well, melted and caught fire. Now I suggest we rewind the clock almost to the very beginning, to when we first started the engine while it was under load. When we were doing that, we actually encountered that issue with the engine binding while it was cold. That's when we were firing up the engine with the Stage 1 injector activated, when the primary equipment was inactive. Now that was the exact moment where this whole thing went south. We glossed over that, decided that it was some kind of contamination that will just get blown out. And that fatal mistake is what brought us here. Prior to starting the engine, we should have torn it down, inspected and cleaned it, because it had been sitting outside with no protection for a long time. And the interesting thing is that it had been sitting there for several decades even. And 1 year later, that mistake we made resulted in us having to take the engine apart. To realize that we should have done that from the very start to identify and resolve these issues for it to work properly. Now you make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our future crazy experiments. And of course, feel free to suggest any ideas as to what sort of crazy unit we can fit to a car. There are plenty of engines out there. There are a whole lot we've never worked with, which I think you'll also be interested to see here. Anyway, that's it for this video. Catch you guys later.